Some horses are remembered for medals, some for records, and some for changing the way people see the world. Endo was one of those horses because Endo did something that seemed impossible. He proved that a horse with no eyes at all could still see farther than most of us ever will. This is the story of Endo the Blind, a horse who lost his sight but never lost his spirit. The story begins on a quiet farm in the American Northwest. A young woman named Morgan Wagner was only 13 years old when her grandmother told her something that every horse-crazy child dreams of hearing. She could get a horse. Not a ride, not a lesson, a horse. Her own horse. Morgan walked into the pasture where several foals grazed together. There were bigger ones, flashier ones, but one horse caught her eye. A young Appaloosa colt with spotted markings and a bold personality. He pranced, he strutted, he seemed completely convinced that he was the most important horse in the pasture. That horse was Endo, and Morgan chose him immediately, even as a foal. Endo had something that is difficult to explain: charisma, confidence, presence. He had the biggest personality, Morgan later said. He thought he was the greatest horse in the world. And in Morgan's eyes, he was. The two of them grew up together, learning, making mistakes, figuring things out as they went. Morgan wasn't a professional trainer. She was simply a young rider with determination. And Endo? Endo was smart, very smart. The kind of horse that listens carefully, the kind that remembers, the kind that begins to understand people in ways to go beyond simple cues. Their partnership grew stronger every year. But life had something difficult waiting for them, something neither of them could have imagined. Endo was 8 years old when Morgan noticed something strange. He was squinting. His eyes watered constantly. In bright sunlight, he seemed uncomfortable. At first, it didn't seem serious. Horses get dust in their eyes. Flies bother them. But the symptoms didn't go away. Veterinarians were called. Examinations were done. And the diagnosis came back with words that every horse owner fears: equine recurrent uveitis, often called moon blindness. It's one of the most common causes of blindness in horses, especially Appaloosas. The disease causes repeated, painful inflammation inside the eye. Each flare-up damages delicate tissues, slowly, relentlessly, until sight begins to fade. Morgan fought it with everything she could: medication, eye drops, careful management, but the disease was stronger. The attacks kept coming, and each one took a little more of Endo's vision away. For years, Morgan and Endo battled the disease. Some days were better than others. Some days, Endo could see clearly. Other days, he struggled. But horses are incredibly resilient. They adapt. They keep moving forward, and Endo was still competing, still working, still enjoying life. Then one day, things got worse, much worse. One of Endo's eyes ruptured. The pain was unbearable. There was only one humane option. The eye had to be removed. It was a devastating moment, but the worst part was still coming, because the disease didn't stop. The second eye continued to deteriorate, and eventually, that eye had to be removed too. Endo would never see again. Not shadows, not shapes, nothing. He was completely blind. For many horses, that would have been the end. A blind horse faces enormous challenges. They rely heavily on vision for safety, for navigation, for understanding the world around them. Without sight, a horse can easily become frightened, confused, even dangerous. Morgan knew the risk. She knew many people would say the same thing: retire him, turn him out, just keep him comfortable. But Morgan saw something different. She saw Endo. Not his disability, not his diagnosis, just the horse she had grown up with, and she decided something. Endo's life wasn't over, not even close. The first days after the surgery were frightening. Endo was nervous, confused. The world had suddenly become silent and dark. Every sound mattered. Every step required trust. Morgan started with the simplest things, walking. Just walking around the barn, around the pasture, talking to him constantly. Her voice became his guide. Slowly, Endo began to understand. He listened. He memorized the environment. He learned where the walls were, where the gates were, where the water buckets were. And soon, something incredible happened. Endo started moving confidently again. He learned to navigate by sound, by memory, by feeling the ground beneath his feet. Horses are extraordinary animals. Their senses of hearing, smell, and touch are incredibly powerful. Without sight, those senses become even sharper. Endo was adapting, but the most important sense Endo relied on was trust. Trust in Morgan, because every time he walked forward, he was choosing to believe that the human beside him would not lead him into danger. That level of trust doesn't come easily. It takes years. And Morgan and Endo had those years behind them. They had grown up together. They knew each other. So Morgan kept asking Endo to try new things, a little more each day, a little farther, a little braver, and Endo responded. Eventually, Morgan asked a question that many people would have thought impossible. Could Endo work again? Could a completely blind horse still train, still perform, still jump? They began with groundwork, voice commands, simple cues. Endo listened carefully. He learned words, he learned tone. Morgan discovered something remarkable. Endo understood far more language than most horses. Not just commands, but emotion, encouragement, reassurance. He knows a lot of words, Morgan explained, and he understands tone. That understanding became the foundation for everything that came next. Soon, Endo was working at liberty. No lead rope, no restraint, just Morgan's voice guiding him. He could walk, trot, turn, stop, all through sound. It was an extraordinary display of communication between horse and human. But Morgan didn't stop there, because Endo had always loved to work. He loved challenges, he loved attention, and he loved showing off. So Morgan asked him to try something even bigger, jumping. At first, the idea seemed absurd. A horse that couldn't see jumping obstacles? But Morgan approached it the same way she had approached everything else, one small step at a time. She guided Endo toward the jump, talking to him, encouraging him, helping him understand where the obstacle was. And Endo jumped, carefully, confidently, gracefully. It was a moment that proved something important. Endo wasn't limited by blindness. He simply experienced the world differently. Over time, Endo's training expanded. He learned complex patterns, obstacles, courses, flying lead changes, pole weaving, working equitation movements. Many of these exercises are difficult even for the sighted horse. But Endo performed them with precision, listening, thinking, trusting. Soon people began noticing videos of the blind Appaloosa. They began spreading across social media. Audiences were amazed because Endo wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Then came the moment that made Endo famous. In 2022, Endo and Morgan attempted something extraordinary. Guinness World Records, and they didn't attempt just one, they attempted 3. First, the highest free jump by a blind horse. Endo cleared 1.06 meters, about 3 feet 5 inches. Then came another challenge, the most flying lead changes by a horse in 1 minute. Endo completed 39 changes. Finally, the fastest time for a blind horse to weave 5 poles. Endo completed the course in 6.93 seconds. 3 records, 1 horse, a horse with no eyes. Morgan often says something important about Endo's achievements. The records were never the goal. The goal was simply to give Endo a life, a meaningful life, a happy life, a life where blindness didn't define him. And that message resonated with people everywhere because Endo represented something larger: resilience, trust, partnership. Endo also changed Morgan's life in unexpected ways. When Morgan struggled with her own health challenges, Endo became her emotional support, her anchor, her friend. And later, Morgan began helping other blind horses. She founded a nonprofit called the Blind Equine, sharing training methods and resources to help owners care for visually impaired horses. Because Endo had proven something important. Blind horses aren't broken, they're simply different. And with patience, they can live incredible lives. Endo's story resonates far beyond the horse world because, in many ways, he mirrors the human experience. Life doesn't always go the way we expect it. Plans change, bodies fail, challenges appear. Sometimes the future suddenly looks very dark. But Endo showed us something powerful. Losing something doesn't mean losing everything. Endo lost his eyes, but he didn't lose his intelligence, his courage, his joy, his partnership with Morgan. And most importantly, he didn't lose his belief in moving forward. People often say that Endo couldn't see, but that isn't entirely true. Endo sees in other ways, through sound, through memory, through trust, and through the quiet connection between horse and human. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Endo was that he never thought of himself as broken. He simply adapted and kept going. Today, Endo's story continues to inspire people around the world: trainers, veterinarians, animal lovers, and anyone who has ever faced adversity, because Endo represented something rare: proof that limitations are often just assumptions. And sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in perfect circumstances, it's found in moving forward anyway. Some horses win ribbon, some win championships. Endo won something greater. He changed how people think about blindness and disability, about the bond between horses and humans. And maybe the most beautiful part of his story was this: the horse who could not see helped millions of people see the world differently. And that is a legacy that will never fade. Rest in peace, Endo. We will miss you.